Ty is a graduate of Hopewell High School. I know y'all appreciate that. Joined the Air Force to serve his country. His career spanned from defense intelligence to special operational assignments, including to acquire and maintain a top secret secured information clearance, bringing him to the Joint Intelligence Center Pacific, the Pentagon, and ultimately the Special Operations Headquarters. After retiring from the U.S. Air Force, he returned to Hopewell and promptly entered the world of journalism. I think my best friend when you got out of the Navy. And let me see, joined Hopewell News, where he eventually became an editor. He also hosted the Talking Story Power Hour radio show about a year and a half at WHAP, 1340 AM and 96.9 FM. Jay also became editor at the Progress Index and a news media personality with LNN News, and they're still around. In Tri-Cities. Currently, he hosts the Freedom Convention podcast on podbean.com, covering current events, fringe science, and paranormal activity. And I think we're in some interesting stuff today. So, it's my pleasure to introduce you as speaker.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for volunteers at the Historic Hopewell Foundation in the Lunch and Learn lecture series. It's a pleasure to be here. I usually find myself in the audience listening to someone else speak. And so it's an honor to be up here. Well, the topic that brings us here is paranormal activity and investigations and personal encounters, both in the Tri-Cities area and surrounding counties, as well as some of the things that I've seen in person during my time in the military, as well as what other people have shared with me. And that's the neat thing about being in the military, is that you are transplanted from your hometown to a place that's unfamiliar to you at first, and then you become familiar with it. And the unique aspect of that is, so is everybody else there. Most of the other people that you meet have been transplanted from their hometowns. And after a while, when you've been in long enough, everybody has been to several different locations, and you accumulate different stories that you hear from time to time when this kind of thing comes up in conversation. And like Tom said, I'm a graduate of Hopewell High School, and a couple of the things that happened here to a couple of my friends, I think you might find interesting too. Okay, so moving on. Already, Halloween decorations have been put out at Michael's and other department stores, so it's in season. It's August, but when you walk around, you're going to see black cats, skulls, skeletons, tombstones, and everything Halloween. So the mood has already begun. So, what is the paranormal? The paranormal is a lot of things. It's a big umbrella term that covers many different things that science hasn't explained fully, but things are happening to people. What's the cause behind it? We're not exactly sure. Everything from cryptozoological creatures, and that would be like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Loch Ness Monster, things and creatures that have not been identified, recognized by science, and also unidentified flying objects. Usually at some point, somebody somewhere has seen some unusual lights in the sky. They have no known explanation for them. Could they be classified top secret aircraft that our government's developed? Probably in some cases. But there are so many sightings, it's hard to say that they all are. Other things covered by the paranormal are powers of the mind. Telekinesis, that's when you have the ability, or there's an ability to move objects, bend spoons. Clairvoyance, where you know things that you have no way of knowing. The government even funded a project, Stargate and Aquarius, where they trained remote viewers to get information that they had no way of accessing via conventional means. The government funded this, and they supposedly defunded it and stopped doing it, if you can believe that. Paranormal also includes some of the more common things that are on TV. That's ghostly activity. That's what the majority of the shows on the Arts and Entertainment Network and some of the other history channels and other channels cover. And that's people trying to look for evidence of ghosts. What they are, we don't know, but people are trying to document and categorize them. So essentially, it covers, the term paranormal covers anything that does not fit into the current understanding of science. And many people have either experienced something personally or know someone who has. Like you might have a brother-in-law or an uncle or a sister or a mom who claims that something really weird happened. All right. So how did you get interested in the paranormal? And that's a good question for everybody here. What got you to be curious about the paranormal? Again, many people have witnessed something unexplained or know someone who has, or it's just simple curiosity. And how I got involved, as a kid growing up, I watched the show In Search Of. You might remember Leonard Nimoy, who played Spock in Star Trek. He hosted it. It was really interesting. They covered topics from the great white shark to witchcraft to ghosts and Bigfoot. You name it, they covered it. Also, I watched the show, fictional, about a newspaper reporter who somehow every week got embroiled in hunting down the monster of the week. And that was Kolchak the Night Stalker, starring Darren McGavin. Great show, fantastic intro theme. And little did I know that when I grew up, I would end up working at the newspaper and end up going on paranormal investigations. So it was pretty interesting. So I saw my first UFO when I was on active duty at Blytheville Air Force Base, also known as Anchor Air Force Base. They changed the name when I was there. Saw my first UFO, just 2 high-altitude lights, and it's a B-52 Stratofortress bomber base with nukes. And so I thought, it's just a high-altitude bomber. And then when the lights started crisscrossing across the sky, I thought, that's no bomber. And I also heard a lot of accounts that I spoke of earlier of the paranormal from other people who were in the military, professionals, Department of Defense civilians, and contractors, and experienced a couple of unusual things myself personally. We'll get into that later. And so after I left the military, came back to Hopewell so my mom could enjoy being a grandmother of my 2 wonderful children, Lance and Emily, and I joined up with Hopewell News as a reporter and eventually becoming an editor. And somebody sent us in a picture that they claimed had a ghost in it. And I thought, this is interesting, I'm going to publish this. So we put it to the paper and I asked the question, what do you think this is? Is it a ghost? Is it a trick of light? Is it someone's imagination? And so it was interesting, we had some response to it. So I put an ad in asking for people to send in more of their ghost photos, and we would put it in the paper, and people would judge for themselves whether or not it was a legitimate photograph of something highly strange, or trick of the light, whatever. And that ad was seen by a local paranormal investigative group called Tri-City Paranormal. And they called me up, and they said, hey, we'd like to invite you to go on an investigation with us because we're investigating a violent bank in Colonial Heights. I was excited because I'd seen the shows and I'd read the books, but I'd never actually done it. So this was my first encounter with the paranormal, and something did happen as I was covering that for the newspaper. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, so let's start off first with paranormal encounters in the Tri-Cities. Now, there are going to be a couple about 5-minute videos that I'm going to include with this presentation, so you can get a feel of what it looks like and sounds like to experience a paranormal investigation. We have a couple of locations in the area. And that way, you can also meet a couple of the, well, I'll save that surprise for later. All right, we're going to start off with something just down the road from here. In fact, you could leave here, drive down the main road that the library's on, go all the way to the end, turn left, and it's Appomattox Manor. During the Civil War, especially, you'll know this, especially if you've been attending these lunch and learn lecture series, that was the busiest port in the world at some point during the Civil War. Grant's headquarters was out here, and Lincoln spent a few days of the last couple of weeks of his life out here. Well, there's a short story about this. When it's open, you can get the full history. But 2 people were walking just after sunset from City Point down near the water. They were going up the cobblestone road that leads right past Appomattox Manor. It was a father in his 40s and his son in his 20s. They couldn't describe exactly what it looked like, but something thin and misty jumped out from behind one of the buildings near the roadway, near Appomattox Manor, and it scared them silly. They went senseless. They screamed, and both of them ran away, and they told me this. They were sweating as they told me this. They vowed never to go out there at twilight or nighttime ever again. That's how severe their shock and fright was. So, what does that make me want to do? I want to go out there at nighttime now. Haven't done it yet. And I won't be alone. So kids, get ready. All right, so that's the Appomattox Manor story. Now next, right down the road from Appomattox Manor, in fact, you'll pass this going to the manor, is St. John's Episcopal Church. She's not here today, but I had her as a guest on my radio show, Melissa. And she described some strange activity in the church because she was the organist. And she's retired now, but she was the organist a few years ago. And she would go there to practice before the Sunday services. So it might be Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night, or an afternoon. And she would go there and she'd be alone, and she'd go into the big room and practice on the organ. something strange happened. There's a swivel door, and I was there during the paranormal investigation a few months later. There's a swivel door that you have to press on. It doesn't just swing because of the breeze or the air conditioning vent. The swivel door opened, leading into the big hall where the organ is. And she looked over and thought, there's nobody here. And it shut and fluttered still. Then she heard footsteps. And she's getting a little spooked. And then, one of the strangest accounts that she described, she smelled an intense smell of cucumbers. You ever smell cucumbers? Like real intense smell of the skin, say you're peeling them? She smelled strong cucumber smell. And she was a bit spooked, but she didn't get a necessarily negative feeling. And eventually, a group called RTL Paranormal, they're also active in this area, they were asked to come and investigate, check it out. And I came along with them. They asked me if I'd come along. And so they brought a psychic. She's a Native American, and a psychic named Wendy. So they all showed up. They set up the cameras, the electromagnetic field detectors, looking for electromagnetic EMF energy, temperature gauges. They set the whole works up. And we were walking around, checked out the cemetery, and the psychic got a feeling in the cemetery. You can see the picture in here in the lower part. She got a feeling in an area of the cemetery. It said that she was sensing like a playful young girl, like maybe around 10 or 11 years old. And she just got a feeling. And without anybody else knowing, one of the members of the church who were escorting us around went to the records room of the church. And this was established in like the 1840s. And she looked up some of the records and went through the list of people who had been born, died, and were buried there. And sure enough, there was a little girl in the records, in the logbook, from the 1800s or early 1900s who had passed away around the age of 10 or 11. And take it for what it's worth, I'm not sure what that means, but it was more than coincidence, and there was no way she could have known the contents of the hard copy records in their storeroom. All right, now, Weston Manor, very popular place. They have tours there, and the docents tell you all about the history of the place. It's where Susanna's midnight run that saved America happened, where she warned the rebels that the British were coming. She crossed the river and rode all the way to the halfway house in Chester. Very brave young lady, in the dark, with no bridge. So, a lot of history here, and I highly recommend getting a tour there. There are a few things you may learn about Weston Manor, and this has been in the papers too. I've written a couple of articles about it. The Lady in Blue. Apparently there's an apparition of a lady in a blue dress, and she's been sighted by several people. They look back and she's not there. And of course the docents, the historical tour guides, they have reported unexplained noises. I think one or two of them said that something rubbed their leg. And at one point, I remember looking up the history of Weston Manor and stumbled across a report where a law enforcement was actually called to the manor because they thought someone had broken in or something had happened. And I was recently trying to find that report again and I couldn't locate it, but I had confirmed before law enforcement had been called to the manor to investigate something going on. Okay, now right across the street, right through that wall, Hopewell Quick Lunch. It's been there since the 1920s. And unfortunately it's closed, but I used to go there and have their devil dogs all the time. Delicious chili dogs. Well, Mary Sue Kraut was the last owner of Quick Lunch. And I'd go there when I was working at the newspaper. They would advertise with us and I'd come by and say hi and get a meal, great food. We got to talking. And she said that some weird things had been happening at Quick Lunch. As you know, it's a very confined space. It's a very tiny building. And she stored the hot dog buns right behind the counter on some shelves on the floor. Like if the counter was here, the shelves were behind her, the grill's over there, and the hot dog hamburger buns were stored right there. And she said, nobody was around except for her and the other people. Nobody was near the buns. It's like someone just took their hand to the buns and swiped off about 6 packs of buns. And she couldn't explain what happened. And then the other interesting thing she said was a little spooky, not necessarily paranormal, was they were cleaning the grease trap out. Hadn't been cleaned in decades. And they discovered a butcher knife. And the butcher knife could not fit into the little vent that the grease drains into to get to the trap, so it had to have been put there by somebody. And so she said she looked up, tried to find newspaper articles or a police report about somebody getting murdered by a butcher knife in Hopewell, but no luck. So Tamara Eastman, who is the Defense Commissary Agency's historian, a great lady. She works on Fort Lee because that's DECA headquarters for the world, and she's their historian. She was talking about some of this, and I told her about Mary Sue's incidents. And so we went out there with some electromagnetic field detectors, some temperature gauges, and a camera or two. And we checked out Quick Lunch one night after it was closed. It got some interesting EMF readings, but no electronic voice phenomena. But it was interesting to document that. Okay, now there's the Beacon Theater highlights video right here. I'm just going to transition to the video. This is a short video. It's going to be about maybe 5 to 6 minutes long tops. But you're going to get a feel of an investigation at the Beacon Theater. And also the treat is, if you've ever watched the Arts and Entertainment Network, 4 of the ghost hunters from that show came to the Beacon Theater, and that's what's in this video. So you'll get a taste of them, and I interviewed each one of them and some other people about what they have seen in the area. So let's get over to that. Here it is, right here. This was just before the pandemic.
What I see it is ghosts or people. They're just not living.
You know, a clergyman or anybody from the church would actually say, yeah, it was a demon. I don't know.
Right.
Photo ops with fans. And this is Ray Savino of RTL Paranormal. He's giving one of his recorders to one of the young enthusiasts.
What do you say?
Okay, and this is Chai, and I'm here with Unity, Bonnie, and Jamie. Okay, they are here participating in RTL Paranormal's ghost hunting event with the ghost hunters from A&E. Now, I've got to ask you guys, what made you interested in the paranormal?
Well, I've been seeing ghosts since I was little. When I was really little, my dad and I were on my front porch, and I pointed across the street and said, "Dad, what is that guy holding a lantern?" And my dad was like, I don't see anybody. And I was like, "No, there's a guy." And I like described him in like military attire holding a lantern.
Was it scary?
No, I don't think I've ever been particularly scared. The only time I've ever had one that I guess really spooked me was we were on vacation. And it was one of those like Jack and Jill style bedrooms, and I rolled over in my sleep. I was on the top bunk of a bunk bed, and I looked through the bathroom, and there was a little boy dragging his blanket, and he like looked me dead in the eyes. He was.
Oh my goodness.
That's not what I was used to.
Now, how old were you when you first saw your first ghost?
She was very small. She wasn't speaking. I mean, in complete sentences and so forth.
You still see ghosts now that you're older?
I don't see full form apparitions anymore. That stopped when I was probably like 13 or 14, I would say.
Okay.
Now it's more I just like feel something is there.
Yeah, all right. Now, what about you two? Have you seen or experienced anything?
Yeah, I saw I saw a flash go up.
Yeah.
Right after that, I never really felt right there, but after that I was,
Where something actually happens, you're paying attention.
Well, it used to be, it was a hospital during the Civil War, so
It's really,
yeah.
You had to share anything with people about what you've experienced. And why can you say anybody experienced something, have seen something, had a cabinet door open on them, or closed?
stay open. I mean, people are no different whether they're here physically or not.
All right, I'm here with Daryl Marston of the Ghost Hunters series on A&E Network. Season 2 is coming up, and it sounds pretty exciting.
April 8th, yeah, it's very exciting. We are completely just blown away by season 2 and all the hard work we put into it. These locations that we're going to in season 2 are just completely amazing. They're off the grid, very desolate, very isolated locations that have never been done before. It's more than a paranormal show anymore. It's not your daddy's Ghost Hunters.
Here with Mustafa from Ghost Hunters, and you are with
Tim from RTL Paranormal.
Tim from RTL Paranormal. So you're going in there and you're acting as if you're going into their home, like treating them with respect, not just yelling at them and saying rude things to provoke them or anything like that, like some groups do.
Yes, if we are, ghosts are just people. So if you're going to talk to somebody and I want to start a conversation with you at a bar, I'm not going to, hey man, you look like drink like I'm you know.
Tim and Mustafa, what's one of the spookiest things you've ever encountered encountered during your time investigating paranormal?
It has to be sitting all concerns around. We went out for it has to be.
Stuff. What about you?
I think for me, we were on a recent investigation in Alaska. Daryl and I both had experiences at the same time, multiple devices, pupils' experiences, all corroborating the same thing. So that to me is like the spookiest because it's like, wow, it's actually pretty much proven as much as possible.
It's independent verification from different people, different sources.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
That's what's really spooky.
Alright, now we're getting into the Beacon Theater, the actual investigation. And they let us go into places that weren't accessible by the public. This is the 3rd floor ballroom, where there's a closet there, a big one, where people have had some strange things happen inside the closet. So everyone who wanted to could go in the closet and see if something touched them or gave them a creepy feeling.
You can ask questions and stay in there as long as you come.
Someone came in running out of that closet crying. Now, these are some of the areas in need of repair that the public doesn't have access to. In some places, the floor was unstable, but we went around some of the iffy areas. It was very spooky to go into the heights of the attic levels of that theater.
This is Brian Murray, Ghost Hunters on A&E, second season coming up. Right now we're doing an investigation at the Beacon Theater. We're on the 3rd floor and we're trying to look into these claims of, this possible woman playing a piano. Yeah. What inspires you to get your passion about paranormal? Everything. I had an experience when I was young and I continued to search to figure out what that was. But number one, I want to help people. And I want to help the entity in both cases. I'd like to help both. This is Rochelle Stratton of A&E's Ghost Hunters, and season 2 is coming up.
Yes, April 8th is the premiere day.
Great, and we're here at the Beacon Theater.
Yes.
And you were in the upstairs ballroom where it was dark and doing some EVP kind of thing. Now, we ventured off into an area that was under renovation.
Yes.
And you stayed in there by yourself after everybody else came out.
There was a tiny hole in the wall, and if you look in it, there's old projectors in there. So I crawled in, and it's actually an old room, and there's more than just one projector. There's actually 2 in there. So I kind of stopped talking, and I heard music playing.
You heard music.
Yes, it sounded kind of like an old jewelry box.
What kind you pop open and it's wind up and you hear it?
One of the things is that there is a lady here who used to play the piano.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if maybe that's the music you would hear.
What got you into the paranormal?
When I was 8, I actually had an experience. I woke up to someone standing at the foot of my bed, and was pretty shaken up about it. I told my mom, she didn't really believe me. The following night, my sister woke up, and the same person was standing at the foot of her bed.
Oh,
so
no.
My mom started to kind of believe us, and then when I got out of high school and into my 20s, my sister actually started investigating and looking more into this.
Okay.
And we eventually joined Revolving Paranormal, which was what Brian actually founded that.
Okay.
And that's how Brian and I met.
Great. What keeps you passionate about investigating the paranormal?
I think it's because it's like little mysteries to solve, which I like solving problems and mysteries. And I also like to help people.
Yeah.
And I know how I felt when I was 8 and someone didn't believe me when I had a paranormal experience.
Yes.
Now I don't want anyone to ever feel like someone doesn't believe them.
Yeah. Now, have you ever been scared?
Oh yeah.
Really? What was one of your scariest moments?
Okay, I shouldn't say scared. I get startled.
Okay.
Okay, so scared you can choose whether you're scared or not.
Yes.
Startled, you can't choose whether or not you get startled.
It's just the response.
It's a response. You can't pinpoint a time I've been like truly scared since I've gotten older. And I think it's more because I look at whoever is there as people.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are people. Very rarely do you run across something that's demonic. It's just a person.
Yeah.
And if you treat them with respect, you will typically get respect back. I mean, they send me off on isolation and solo runs all the time and tiny little holes, and I do just fine. I actually really like it.
Great. Now I will keep you because I know there's stuff going on upstairs. One last question. For the upcoming season 2 of Ghost Hunters on A&E, what's one of the events that we should look forward to? Is there an episode that stands out to you?
Oh, I will say that My favorite location from season 2 would have to be the Colorado episode.
The Colorado.
Yes. Kristen and I investigated that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually our first time kind of meeting her going out and investigating with just us.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so it's fun. And it's a different dynamic, but I like it. So, but it was a lot of stuff happening there.
Great. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk.
Thank you for talking to me. And let's get back to this investigation.
You bet. So that was at the Beacon Theater right here in Hopewell. It's been investigated many times over the years. And again, those are the ghost hunters. So you never know what is around the corner here in Hopewell. All right, let's get back to the presentation. All right, now we venture over to Petersburg and Blandford Cemetery. And now you can see a photo of Tamara Eastman, the historian I told you about, myself, and that's Ray Savino of RTL Paranormal, and a few other people. We went out there, I believe it was around Halloween, and it was at nighttime. And you'd think it would be a spooky location. But for me, I found it very serene and peaceful. You're right in the middle of Petersburg, and we hardly heard any sirens, and it was almost like there was a dome of silence over the entire area. But Ray captured some electronic voice phenomenon, and that's where you take out a digital recorder and you just press record, and you just ask some questions and leave some moments of silence, empty where no one speaks. And then when you review your recording, there might be some voices replying to you. And that might sound outlandish, it might be just chance or misinterpretation of background noise, but I had an incident happen to me. I'll tell you about it a little bit. It was at Center Hill. Every January they have their Ghost Walk event, where you take a tour of the mansion and you go down to the tunnel. You're going to see this too in the next video coming up. And we actually captured something on camera at that encounter. But at one point during the tour, they let you know we're going to take about 60 seconds of silence so that we can just be quiet, turn the lights off, and if we're lucky, you get to hear the footsteps of soldiers marching through the mansion and down towards the tunnel. I never heard any of that, but I was by myself. I was in a room alone, the lights went out, nobody else is talking around me, and I'm making a mental note for the newspaper article I'm about to write. And I just made the comment, it's as quiet as a crypt at midnight. I was going to use that somewhere in the story to set the stage. And so, it's on my recorder, and I didn't think anything of it. And I go back to the Hopewell News, and it's snowing outside, it's dark, and it's a Sunday night, and nobody else is there, and I'm writing my story, and I hear noises in the building. It's a big building, and the wind's blowing, but I'm by myself, and I'm listening to that recording as I'm typing the story, and I hear myself say, it's as silent as a crypt at midnight. And a voice that was not there when I made that recording said, at you, or at you. And that's when I looked around, the hair in the back of my neck stood up, and I said, yep, I've done enough overtime, I'm gonna go back home and work on this at home. So I left, and I was looking over my shoulder. So you'll get a taste of the Center Hill event coming up. All right, now, Wabi Sabi. They serve great sushi, a lot of good food. They usually have some kind of live entertainment, some music. There's a basement down below where they have a bar lounge and a stage. And Stephanie and I used to go there and hear the music and have a couple of beverages. Well, they got the attention of Tri-City Paranormal because the owner, at the time it was DJ and his friend Lance and their staff. They had encountered some strange things happening at Wabi Sabi. The bartendress was there after it had closed, and she was there by herself, stocking up the supply room, getting the beer and other beverages stocked, and the door slammed on her when she was in there and the lights went out. Needless to say, it freaked her out. And several people, including the owner, had seen what they called the ghost of an emaciated, near starving looking Civil War African American soldier in the basement, standing at one end facing the street, sort of where that car's front wheel is. As you can look down and actually see down to the basement floor through a grating. And so Tri-City Paranormal went out, asked me if I wanted to go, came along with them. They wired all the cameras up, the infrared cameras, and everybody was out. The place was closed. It was late at night. 3 of us were in the basement. 2 of the people, we were all seated at a table. Lights are out. 2 of them were sitting with their backs against the wall with the open basement behind them, looking at the open basement. I'm sitting facing them with my back to the open basement. I didn't think much of it at the time. And then the electromagnetic detectors, EMF detectors, sort of spiked, saying there's some kind of energy going on beyond the normal amount. And then I heard what sounded like a chair that you're sitting in scoot about 4 inches behind me. That's when I thought, I really should be with my back to the wall. So we didn't see it happen, but that certainly happened with a spike on the EMF detectors. So that was really interesting. Also, just around the corner from Wabi Sabi is an Italian restaurant called Maria's. Really good food. They hand grain their tomato sauce. Gotta give them props for that. The owner, she said that she would like to have an investigation, and I got with her, and she was curious because a few things had happened. People had heard footsteps, seen doors open and close, the usual kind of paranormal stuff, and maybe somebody had seen a ghost. And she was all for the investigation and talked with her family about it. And they're Italians, and they said, nope, we would like to do it, but we don't want to bother anybody or anything, whatever it may be, so we just want to leave it as it is. And I can understand that. All right, now, Violet Bank in Colonial Heights was the Civil War headquarters for General Robert E. Lee. And this was my first encounter with the paranormal on an investigation, the Tri-City Paranormal. So I've been there, I've taken pictures, gotten interviews, and was ready to leave. It's about 2:30 in the morning. Nobody's in there. The curator of the museum is there. The doors are all shut. The wires leading to the 4 cameras they have in there are wired up. And everybody's out at the van where they have a big screen, and it's divided into 4 quadrants. And each quadrant has a camera's view of inside the building. And so I'm saying goodbye to everybody, and as I'm leaving, the infrared camera inside of Violet Bank, the others were standard, this was infrared, it panned all by itself. And I asked them, I said, is that motorized? And they said, no. So we all run into Violet Bank where that camera is, trying to see if there's a crooked table, or one of the tripod legs gave out, or there's an air conditioning vent nearby. Nothing, no open windows, nothing of the sort. There was no explanation for how that camera panned all on its own. It was almost like I was leaving, whatever was in there knew I was leaving, and just wanted to give me a little hint, a little appetizer.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so I ended up staying for about another hour, and I was about to leave again. And in the middle of Violet Bank is a place called The Battery. It's got an arched, curved brick ceiling and walls. It was the place of last resort. If you were being attacked, you'd hole up in there. It's where you kept your gunpowder and your last resort weapons and some supplies. Well, they had a camera in there too, and I'm about to leave. And we're looking at the camera, and I'm heading to my car, and this spider-like black mist shadow crawls across the top of the arc of that room in the Battery. And we all run in again. So they're trying to get an electronic voice phenomenon recorded. And it was a really interesting experience, and made for a really good article because I experienced those things in person during my very first investigation. And again, it's not like a Ghostbusters scenario where you see a full-blown apparition scaring the wits out of you with lightning behind it, but it was enough that it was real. And it was definitely real. Okay, let me see. Okay, now we're up to the Center Hill Mansion. And this is an interesting video. It's about 5 minutes long. And you'll get a taste of what that experience was like. I was there with Christy Higgins of the Progress Index. She's known as the social butterfly and she writes for them all the time and has a weekly column. And that's her right there talking to the people exiting the tour. We are here at Center Hill Mansion, and this is the annual ghost tour. And this is Christy, and we're checking this out, and hopefully we'll get some ghosts inside.
So I'm looking forward to it. I have never even been in here. I don't believe I have been in here.
Well, hey, you want to go in and check it out?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, well, let's do it.
Hey, you forgot to tell me what you saw on your first time here, because you've been in this tour before.
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, in fact, I covered this in 2009, my first time. And during one of the tours, the tour guide was describing the house, and I was looking at a filing or a cabinet, and the door just went and opened up all on its own. Nobody was standing near it. So things can happen on these tours.
Yeah. Well, I hope they'll happen tonight. That'll be exciting.
It will. And I'm excited. So let's see what happens.
All right, here we go.
It's a really neat experience at Center Hill at nighttime. You see the background lights of Petersburg and the sky's all lit up. It's very atmospheric. and they bring you right into the depths. Now, what is happening here tonight?
So we're having our annual Ghost Watch. We've been doing this for probably 25 or 30 years. We also give people an opportunity to go into the tunnel, which is interesting all by itself.
The tunnel?
The tunnel. But you're going to hear some very interesting stories about things that have happened here.
Have you ever been scared here?
No, I had a ghost, I think, fall on my pant leg one time. I turned around and looked at the floor, didn't see anything on my pant leg, and I said, "Stop it!" And I haven't had any problems since.
I'm Janet. I will be your guide this evening. Thank you for coming and sharing your evening with us while we tell some of the stories about the house.
And you learn a lot about the history of these places when you go to these kinds of tours. It's not just paranormal. You do learn the facts and the history. But the tunnel is an interesting experience.
All right, Christy, you're going into the tunnel.
These two nice ladies already got a little alcove. We think that maybe stored there. And then there are 3 vent holes that some of you may be standing under them because they go all the way back.
That's all standing there at the top. How was the tunnel?
It's really cold out here with that. And it's cold, it's really cold out here.
And you can smell the dampness in the air.
Right.
Is that somebody?
Look at her.
It's a shadow. It's a ghost shadow.
And like, if I'm going
I'm not going to by myself. Awesome. Let's see where they go next.
Okay.
It's a very beautiful building. And those little lights you see, that's camera. It's a camera effect.
If you look in the mirror about where you can see, it looks like you may be able to see a face.
Do you see that face?
A number of guests who have said they think that the figure in the mirror is Rebecca Pocahontas Boland. There was a portrait of her in the dining room, but you can look and see for yourself if you see a face.
And this is the time, and another tour where I heard that voice. And again, it's neat to see Peter's work at that time lit up. Watch for the horror. There were no vents going on. As you can see, her hair is not being blown by wind or vent. It's not windy. I don't know what those are, but they're on camera. When orbs are photographed, that's what they seem to look like. And other people have reported seeing orbs at Citadel. This gentleman.
Probably 10 years ago, I took some still photos and saw a lot of orbs. I'm going to use the video too, just capture stuff.
I just got some
I saw some of that, yeah, it's pretty cool.
We are here with Pam Sorla. Pam, what brought you to Center Hill Mansion up during the ghost tour?
My nephew actually wanted to go see it and read up on the history. It was really interesting, so we were very curious if he could hear anything.
Okay. Did anything go bump in the night when it was dark? Okay. Hey, at least it was a lot of fun.
It was.
You've just completed the ghost tour. I'm here with Tiffany and Kate. So, what happened inside?
I used the EVP, electronic voice phenomenon.
Yes.
And I kept it running the whole time.
You did.
And it spiked every time the gentleman in there mentioned the name Bollinger. But let's see, 32 EVPs.
32 EVPs.
That's what it says. I don't know if it's just funny to me.
Now, what was the other thing in your hand?
So I have my EMF detector. And this thing really jumped up to 2.1. We were standing right near the front door in the hallway. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun. We love it.
What did you think about the experience?
Oh, it was great. I got several photos. Lots of orbs.
Lots of orbs?
Lots of orbs.
Okay, Krista, you have been here for a good chunk of the tour. Have you seen or heard anything unusual?
Well, you, Chai,
Yes.
captured you're filming
Yes.
the interview was tonight, and Chai was on the embarrassing
Orbs went by. Was it dust or was it spirits? All right. So there's no reason here, so if it was dust, I was blowing it because it was moving. That's another good point. There's no reason here. So that's the tour of Center Hill. Happens every January 27th, give or take. You might want to look into it. They also have the regular tours. I think I was told that you only get to see the tunnel during the ghost walk. And so Chrissy's still out the progress index, and it was really neat going to the Center Hill Mansion and writing up that story for the paper. Okay, let's get back to the presentation again. There we go. I just wanted to give you guys and gals a taste of what it's like to go to one of these really fun events. You get to learn history, you never know what you might encounter, opening cabinet doors, orbs, you name it. And we're surrounded by it. Okay, so that's a tour, taste of the area. And there's so much more, as you can see by the mile markers that are everywhere in this area, all over Virginia, in fact. Oh, just to let you know, we have a special guest in the audience too, and that's Alex. He's the podcaster for the Odd Virginia podcast. You might want to check that out. He drove here from Stanton this morning to attend this event. And there's Fran, who's here from North Carolina. She's had a couple of experiences. She's a Native American as well. And everybody else who came, thank you, Pam, French, Stephanie, everybody else, family and friends and attendees. Okay, now, paranormal accounts by the military, or that I heard from other professionals in the military, and a couple things that happened to me in person. Okay, so I told you about the Acre Air Force Base, the Lynnville Air Force Base, Arkansas, UFO sighting. That was about it for Acre. Avebury in England. When I was at Acre, I went on a temporary assignment to Fairford Air Base in the United Kingdom. And while I was there, I happened to have a little time off, and was one of the British people who worked there gave me a tour. We went to get some supplies or something, and we drove through Oxford, but we went to Avebury. Now, everyone's heard of Stonehenge, but Avebury is a much bigger circle with bigger megalithic stones. And it's like miles in diameter. And a road goes through the center of Avebury, does a sharp right turn for 100 or 200 yards, and goes back in the direction. At that turn, there's a tavern. So naturally, we went in and had a pint. But as we were approaching Avebury, Arthur, my tour guide, his name was Arthur, he says, "Yes, John, we're approaching Avebury." And I was looking at him, and I felt like this heaviness. I could barely keep my eyes open. I felt like my energy was being drained, and I was going to fall asleep. And I got plenty of rest the night before. But I didn't tell anybody this, but I felt really tired and drained. So we go to Avebury. He stops the little mini European van that we're in, and I go and touch one of the megalithic stones, and it was a really neat experience. Have our pint and come back. Well, years later at Minot Air Force Base, one of my friends, she was Italian and she made some homemade lasagna, and her husband was one of my friends that I'd met when I was working at a missile launch control facility for a little while, and he was one of the security forces guarding it. And they invited us over for dinner. They also invited another couple over, and his other friend was married to a Brit, and we got to talk about some of the strange things. And I said, "Yeah, I've been to Avebury," and as we were approaching the circle, and she stopped me. She said, "Let me guess, you felt like you were drained of energy. You could barely keep your eyes open." And I said, "Yeah, how did you know that? Are you psychic?" She says, "No, but other people have told that to me. So there might be something to it. I don't know what it means, but it was a direct experience." Okay, now, while I was at Minot, they had nuclear surety exercises. And this is before I cross-trained into my final career field and getting into intelligence and all that stuff. But they tasked other people from different career fields to come help them during the nuclear surety exercises as a security forces augmentee. So you got spun up on the M16 and grenade launchers and this, that, and the other, and they gave you just a quick crash course training so you can help during these exercises. Because if a base ever fails a nuclear surety exercise, it's not a good day for the commander. We've got B-52s with nukes armed on the runway, ready to take off. And they have to be guarded 24/7. So you get to know the security forces augmentees and the security forces themselves. You go to guard mount together, you share posts together, and you're just as responsible for keeping that area secure as they are. And it's bad news if someone breaks your perimeter. Well, during all the downtime, especially during night shift, which I happen to get, you get to talking. And they told me about an incident that happened downrange at the flight line where the gap is, where it's the most important area to guard, because if somebody was going to infiltrate the base, that's where they would go. And so these security forces airmen or at a portable guard shack that have been dropped off, and they're standing their post. It's nighttime, it's winter. They get a call from their sergeant saying, hey, be on alert. The flight sergeant is going to try to penetrate somebody's perimeter tonight, and if he is successful penetrating your perimeter, that's like at least a letter of reprimand, because that's no kidding, nukes. And so they said, Roger, we'll be on the lookout. About an hour later, they see someone in the tall grass, about maybe 50 yards away from them, in the moonlight. Cold, frigid North Dakota winter. And it looks like the flight sergeant's on his hands and knees crawling around in this tall grass. They can't make him out. And so they call it into their sergeant, their supervisor, and say, hey, look, we think the flight sergeant's out here in the grass crawling around trying to get past us, but we can see him, but he's still obscured by the stalks. And they said, that's not the flight sergeant. He tried to penetrate Sector 8 about 20 minutes ago. And so the guys in the guard shack got out their high-powered flashlight, shined a beam on what they thought was the flight sergeant, and the thing stood up, about 8 feet tall, covered in hair, glowing orange eyes. It opened its mouth in a silent shriek at them, turned around and faster than they could describe, ran for the perimeter fence, jumped over it, and vanished into the night. Needless to say, those guys were a little bit more careful every time they had guard duty at nighttime out there. But that's North Dakota. There are miles and endless miles, oceans of wheat out there that no one ever sees for years at a time. So let's see. Also another one. This is officially documented, and it's made the news many times. There was a B-52 Stratofortress coming in for a landing at Minot. And as they were approaching the base, they saw an unidentified glowing flying object that was crescent-shaped. And this is back in the day where if you reported something like this, you would lose your top secret clearance, you would lose your PRP codes, your personal reliability program codes. They would think you were crazy and ground you. So it was not in your interest to report something unusual like this to your superiors. So a lot of these things went hush-hush. But it's documented at all of the nuclear weapons bases, the nuclear bases in our military. Each base that had active nukes had UFO activity, including UFOs hovering over some of the silos and either deactivating the missiles, the Minuteman missiles, or getting them to launch. And it was crazy when the launch control crew started a countdown on their computers. They couldn't stop for an immediate launch. And then at the last minute, it stopped. Sort of scared everybody. So that's happened at all of our nuclear bases. It's out there, but you have to look for the information. Now, another one was a phone call from an outpost guarding the nukes and the bombers from a tower that was not manned. So there was nobody in the tower, it wasn't being used, but the command center got a call from that tower. And nobody was saying anything, so they sent down a team to go investigate to see if somebody broke it in and was playing with them or some prank. Nobody was at the tower. Nobody was there, so they couldn't explain how that tower phoned into the command center. Okay. Let's see. Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii. I've been in North Dakota for 5.5 years. In Blytheville, Arkansas, 4.5 years before that. I thought somebody did not like me. I'm from Hopewell, and part of the reason I joined up was to travel, and I get Blytheville, Arkansas. Minot, North Dakota. So after that, I got an assignment to Hawaii, the Joint Intelligence Center Pacific. So I was in the Air Force, living on Hickam Air Force Base, working at Pearl Harbor, at JICPAC. And I was staying in the dorms my first year there to get a feel for the area so I could find a good place to live off base. I come home one night, it's 2:30 in the morning, put out the daily intelligence bulletin, got finished early, bicycled home through Pearl Harbor, and watched TV for an hour or so, then it was time to hit the hay. Taking the remote control, let's turn the television off. It's not turning off. The VCR is off, there's static on the TV's on, and like most people, I'm fiddling with the controller for about 5 minutes instead of walking across the room to press the button. Well, finally, I had it. I get up, press the button on the TV, and it's not turning off. It's static, just like in the Poltergeist movie. So I go behind the TV stand, I unplug everything. Nothing's plugged in. TV will not turn off. It's staticky. And I'm not scared, I'm just frustrated. And so I just go lie down, put the pillow over my head, and wake up the next morning, everything's fine, never happened again. That's Hawaii, it's a very haunted island. Now the other one, again, I'm about 2, 3 in the morning, leaving work, I leave Joint Intelligence Center Pacific. I'm going uphill on Kamehameha Highway, headed to the main gate of Pearl Harbor where I cross over to Hickam. Coming downhill is someone on a bicycle. Silent, I don't notice or remember any noises. It's a kid. He's about, looks like he might be 10 or 11. Caucasian guy. And he doesn't look distressed, doesn't look worried, but I'm thinking, what is a kid doing out at 2, 3 in the morning? And the last thing I want to do is have to go and testify for the security forces on what happened and who I saw. And so I bike past him and he passes me. And then I think, well, maybe he's in trouble, you know, and I look back, nobody there. Was it a real kid who just went for an early morning ride? I don't know. But he should have been, in my view, rounding the corner, but he wasn't there. Okay, let's see. I had my second UFO sighting at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona, Tucson. I was there for a blue flag exercise and was there for about 3 weeks. One morning I got up before everybody else and it's pre-dawn, but the sky is lit up. And not bright, but there's scalloped clouds high altitude above me. And I just happened to look up because I'm a sky watcher. And I see this fleck of light as if it were an autumn leaf blowing erratically on the fall wind. Like, it wasn't a straight line, but it went from one end of the horizon to the other, erratically across the sky above the clouds. What it was, I have no idea. It wasn't something in my glasses, something unusual. And that's the nature of the paranormal. We're not exactly saying what something is, but stuff is happening and people are encountering it. And that's the important thing. So, if you want to hear an interesting podcast about Odd Virginia, definitely go to my podcast, which is at podbean.com, and it's called Freedom Cognition. I talk about interesting things happening, current events, with an intelligence perspective behind it. A lot of the things over the last 3 years have not been like we were described. That's another topic. The other podcast to listen to is called Odd Virginia. And of course, we have the guest here, came from Staunton. Check out Odd Virginia. Alex is here. And you can talk to them too afterwards if you're interested. Okay, so that's it for the formal presentation. There's some time for questions or for anyone to share anything they may have experienced.